Email, probably one of the most widely used forms of digital communication. It can be used for one-on-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. It's a common way that we collect communication from supporters, from customers, partners, and the media. If you think about it, there's not really anybody out there that doesn't have email in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's personal or business, nonprofit, whatever. Everybody uses email. In fact, these days it's gotten to where it's pretty rare to find somebody that doesn't at least have an email address. They may not have much else beyond that, but they at least have an email address. And email's a trusted source of communication. Well, trusted and untrusted these days. But it's a common way that a lot of organizations still will both mass collect and mass distribute communication. And that's an important piece. And at least as of this recording, email is something that every nonprofit really still needs. In fact, almost every company and nonprofit still needs. I think the goal of this episode is to help you kind of get to a point where you can comfortably set up email. That's the goal here. Now, there's going to be a lot of other little minor pieces, but I really wanted to take this episode as an opportunity to walk you through the high-level pieces of what was needed to get email set up and running. So we covered some of this in episode 3, and if you haven't listened to that, go ahead and go back and listen to it. But today we're going to be covering a little bit beyond what episode 3 covered. So just to recap from episode 3, we're going to look at some things here. And when you're looking at email, one of the things you need to look at is look at different services and what they offer. There's Office 365, there's Google, there's Google Workspace or G Suite, however you know it. There's other companies that offer it. Those are the two big players, and oftentimes you're going to hear me talk about them a lot because they're the two big players that also offer nonprofit benefits. So we'll probably end up covering them a lot, but there are other people that provide email services. There are definitely CRMs and marketing tools that also provide some level of email service. But today we're probably going to focus on those two the most. But things you want to look for regardless are you want to look at price. How much does it cost? Because there's usually, if you're going to have an email, so I need to make a delineation. If you're going to have, there's two ways you can have your email address. You can have it with your domain or without. For example, we're going to use the First Church example again. You could have firstchurch@gmail.com, or you could have Zach@firstchurch.com. You see the difference there? In one of them, you might have just it's that ending piece, which is called the domain. It's what that ending domain is going to be the difference. Now, there's nothing wrong with having, Zach.firstchurch@gmail.com, but it just doesn't have the nice, polished, professional look that having your own domain tied to an email account can have. I think it's very good when you're trying to present a good professional front to have your email tied to, or you have your domain tied to your email. But it's definitely not a requirement. And you know what? If you're at a point you can't quite do that yet, for whatever costing reason, there's nothing wrong with that. You can go to Gmail, you can go to Outlook, and you can fire up a free @Gmail, @Outlook, I guess you could technically do @Yahoo, but in my personal opinion, that does not present a professional front at all. Typically, I feel a lot of times just from watching the technical world, if you want people to take you serious, at the very minimum, you should have at least an @Outlook or an @Gmail account. But if you use one of those other services, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing like bad per se about it. But in this case, what we're going to be covering today is if you're going to have your domain tied to it. So the first thing you want to look at is pricing, because most of these services, even in the nonprofit version, might have still some cost associated. Now, the basic plans for both platforms you can get for free, both the Google Workspace or G Suite, formerly known G Suite, or for Office 365. You want to look at if they have nonprofit programs. Now, again, covering those two, they do. But if you're looking at another email provider beyond them, you want to find out, do they have any nonprofit programs where the nonprofit gets any special discounts or extra perks or anything like that? You've got this 501c3, try to take advantage of those things that companies are offering with that. Another piece you want to look at is mobile apps. Do they offer apps that way you can access your information from your phone? Like maybe you want to open your emails, or as we get into this, we covered it on the last episode with the digital suite. Maybe you want to view documents, but in this case, we're going to stay on emails. But yeah, maybe you want to view and send and receive emails from your phone. Do they offer security features? Do they have two-factor authentication? Do they have email logs, password policies, different things there? You want to think about when you're setting up your email. If somebody got into your email account and started sending things, when people get emails from you, it's considered trusted. And if people get to know whether it's your at Gmail, at Outlook, or at your domain, people consider email to be a trusted source. That's why there's so many people out there trying to spam or trying to spoof as via email pretending to be someone they're not, is because people consider email a trusted source of information. If my followers, supporters, fans, whatever you want to call them, get to trusting my email and someone gets in there, then all of a sudden the integrity of that trust has been violated. If I have to go back through and tell people, hey, don't this one email you can't trust, but the rest of them you can, well, that's always going to leave a mark. That's always going to make it harder moving forward, where everybody's going to now start second guessing every email I send. Now, once you find a platform that has a nonprofit offering, if you decide to find one and use one like Google Suite or Google Workplace or Office 365, you need to walk through the process of getting approved. Now, typically, they'll have landing portals, and I'll probably include in the description here the landing portals for both Office 365 and Google Workspace. But they'll have portals that they offer that are specific to nonprofits where they'll help walk you through the process. Now, after you walk through the process, the next piece of it that's going to be crucial is that once you're approved that it's crucial is when you're filling this out. Sorry, I'm a little scattered right there. Part of the thing is when you're filling that out, they're going to ask you for information. So before you do any of this, you need to make sure you're an approved 501c3 with the U.S. government. And again, I'm talking to anyone that's listening. This is involving people as of right now that are stateside in the U.S. Before you start in this process, you have to make sure you are already 501c3 approved by the U.S. government, because that will be part of the approval process, and they're going to ask for different things. But just make sure you have all your 501c3 paperwork and your bylaws and your everything that you would have done to submit to get 501c3 status. Have that on hand, because there's a good chance they're going to ask for some of that same information. Now, once you're approved, you'll be given access to start signing in and setting up your new account. And one of the first things you probably want to do once you do that is go through the process of getting your domain tied to it. So if you went and in one of our previous episodes, I believe it was episode 2 or it was either 2 or 3, we covered purchasing a domain. If you've already bought a domain, then the next thing you want to do as soon as you get access to your email account or your new email platform is tie your domain to your email platform. And this can be done in different ways, but the main thing is that you want to make sure you get it done. And you can probably very easily, go to Google, go to YouTube and look up, how to connect my domain to, and then the name of your service, whether it's Google Workspace, Office 365, or one of the other ones. And then people will have videos to walk you through that. It's, there's a lot of information out there that you can find very easily. And a lot of times these companies are wanting you to do that anyway, so they'll walk you through the process. So if you just look up the platform you're using and how to connect a domain, they'll usually have step-by-step guides, a lot of them with photos, walking you through that, because they want you to do this. They want you to be interconnected into their system, so you'll want to stay on their platform. Now, once you've done that piece, the next thing you want to do is pause, which maybe sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but you want to pause and you want to define your standards. Now, these are my recommendations, and I actually happened to go over this with a coworker of mine named Matthew McCane, and he even brought some things to the table, especially when we get down here in a second to passwords, on good standards. And so my recommendations are, when you start defining your standards, and you want to use these standards across the board, is when you're making email addresses, and this is for when you start making email addresses. So you got approved, you got in, you connected your domain, now we're creating email addresses. My recommendation is use the email address standard of firstname.lastname@yourdomain.com. So using the First Church example, it would be, zach.collins@firstchurch.com. I think that gives the best option for as your ministry grows, you're going to have the least chance, at least, I can't say never, but the least chance of getting where you have two people with the same exact first name and last name working for your ministry. Now, of course, if you decide to hire two John Smiths, I can't help you with that, but typically it will help you avoid that. The next thing I would suggest is that you have your team, this is a big one, require your team to have passwords that are secure. And by secure, there's two ideologies of this. There's short passwords and long passphrases. Let's go over short passwords first. The first one is a short password, and the basics of a short password are it has to have a minimum of 8 characters, and then of that password, you have to have in that password of 8 characters, you need to have at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, one number, and one special character. And special characters being things like exclamation points, $signs, pound symbols, etc. The next thing is you don't want your password to contain anything that's identifiable to the user. So their names, part of their name, their initials, anything that would be just kind of clearly guessable to them. Kids' names, things like that even. You want to avoid things that are too super like, oh, I could look that up online and find it. Because it's really amazing. If you want to start doing some interesting, start Googling your employees. You'd be amazed what you'll find in the sense of how easy it is to find people's information online. Now, if you want to take this a little far, so that's the basics. So 8 characters. In those 8 characters, at least have one uppercase, one lowercase, one number, and one symbol. And that the passwords don't contain any part of their name, their kids' names, etc. For bonus points, you can make a digit the first character of the password, make a digit the last character of the password, or don't even allow consecutive identical characters, such as having 2 A's, 2 1's, 2 exclamation points. And these are bonus points. This is giving you that extra bit of security. And even as an extra bit of bonus points would be, instead of having a minimum of 8 characters in length, make the minimum 12 or 16. Now, that's for making short passwords. The other ideology of good passwords, or good security when having to create a password or passphrase, is the passphrase ideology, which is we're not going to create a really complicated password of any length because people then write that down. The whole point of this is you want to have something people aren't going to write down. If you write down your password and stick it on your desk, you've literally completely messed up the point. The whole point is to not have it something written down, something you can remember. If you can remember the short password and the way we described it, great, do that. If that's difficult for you, then try long passphrases. Now, a long passphrase is typically characterized by 14 characters long. It's usually 3 or 4 non-related dictionary words. So we could make your password orange, truck, sunrise. Right? It's 3 words, unrelated. I mean, I guess you could probably find some way they're related, but you get what I mean. They're not like Chevy pickup truck. That's 3 words. But those are 3 words that are related really directly. So you want to try to find stuff that's unrelated, and then you separate each word by a period or a space. Maybe if you wanted to, you could try like an exclamation point or another character, but the whole point is it's a phrase. It's a phrase you can remember, and believe it or not, people don't really know this. In a lot of systems, not all, and you have to pay attention to this, in some systems they don't allow this, but in a lot of systems, a space, just the space bar, that empty space is considered a special character. So if the systems you're using allow it, you can use a space as a special character, and it continues to greatly make the password more complicated. So you could do orange, space, truck, space, sunrise. And then and then right there you've created a complicated password with some level of complications. For bonus points, capitalize the first word of every letter, or first letter of every word. Throw a number in there maybe in between one of the words, or do like a space 1, a space 2 at the end of it, kind of a thing. But again, the whole point is it's more about remembering the phrase and then just remembering what you used to space out the phrase. Now, either one of these are a good way to set up your password or passphrase. The whole goal is, what can you remember without writing it down? Because again, as I mentioned, if you're writing it down, at that point it's not even worth having a password. Somebody walks by your desk, they see your password. It's over. Right there, you've just messed up the whole thing. So whether you go with short passwords or long passphrases, the whole point is to have something you can remember, something you know that you do not have to write down or store somewhere else. Now, if I seem a bit passionate about this whole thing with the passwords and maybe a little bit even harsh, it's just because email is one of the most, I don't want to say dangerous things, but dangerous things that can get compromised. I want you to think about for a minute how many online services you have tied to your email account. Could it be social media, banking, communications, personal records, investments, whatever? Just take a minute. We're going to just pause here for a second. We're going to get real quiet, and I want you to think about for a minute all the different things you have tied to your email address. Now, I want you to think about something else. If somebody were to compromise your email address because you didn't have a good password policy in place, what would that cause? What would that cause? How much damage would that do if they could get in? Because think about it, all they need then is to start going around finding what emails, what services are coming to your email account, and then from there they could start going and trying to reset passwords. A lot of places will let you reset the password so long as you have the email account. You have access to the email. So if you have access to the email, you can reset a lot. So that's one thing you really need to think about when you're doing that. The next thing I would do right after this is once you've set up those policies in place, I would advise that then go ahead and create email addresses for your team. So you've already followed the standardizations I just mentioned. Now you're going to go and you're going to create email addresses for every member of your team. Now I want to clarify something because we're about to talk about a different kind of email address. These email addresses that I'm recommending are purely for your team. They are for employees or volunteers that you feel need an email address tied to your organization. This is not for places that you're going to be collecting general information or having things go to. This is purely for your team. Now, the next step after you create the email addresses for your team that I advise is to set up two-factor authentication for those email addresses. And the reason I think this is so important goes back to what I just mentioned, is what would happen if somebody compromised your email. Now, I know a lot of people could hear, having to have a good password or having to have a longer password or however you want to do it. Whether it's the longer passphrase or a shorter password, that's complex. People hear that and they go, because it's a layer of complication. But again, go back to what's that going to cost you if that gets compromised? And think about your reputation. If your accounts get compromised and people get into your stuff, let's say you manage people's records. Let's say you have donors and you have donors' home addresses and things like that you start collecting. Even if you have them in your email addresses, for example. If people have emailed you their home address or things like that, if that stuff gets compromised, if your email gets compromised, and then from there they can pivot into other accounts that you hold. Let's say you've got an online, customer relations management system. What are you going to do? How do you maintain that reputation? Because now your customers are going to have less trust in you because obviously their data has been exploited in some way, shape, or form. And so now you not only have lost time and money as you try to recover this, you've also lost reputation. And we're going to cover this more in a later security podcast I want to do, but just think about that. Think about what all you've just possibly lost there. And setting up two-factor doesn't have to be this big, daunting thing. Most of your big email providers want you to set it up. A lot of your online services in general want you to set it up. And it can be very simple. In fact, two big authenticators I can tell you that you probably have an account for already that you can tie to is the Microsoft Authenticator and the Google Authenticator. Most of us have an Outlook, a Hotmail, a Gmail, If you really want to go back their ways, I think @live.com. You have an authenticator that'll tie to one of those. And just so you know, there's a lot of them out there. It's not just those. LastPass makes one, and Duo makes one, and there's just a lot of different ones out there. So yeah, those are a couple just to think of that I can think of off the top of my head. But you know what? You want that multi-factor to be tied to an app, and the reason I say tied to an app, I would not recommend having your multi-factor tied to your phone number or to your email, because those are also very easy to break comparatively to an app. So download one of the apps, go to whatever, log into your email account, and start making sure that everyone on your team has that set up. And then just make that something everybody does. Now later on, we get into more security stuff, and we may get into even maybe some security policies. I'm still trying to figure out what that podcast would look like. We may just cover this more in detail, but at least for now, especially if you got a small team, just making sure, just going to everybody and saying, hey, do you have this set up? Can you show me you have it set up? Kind of a thing. Trust but verify. A lot of times in small teams, we're good about trusting people because, I know so-and-so. Trust but verify. Always just double check that they've got that two-factor authentication set up via an app. Log into, circle back around. Log in, Google real quick, or YouTube, how to set up two-factor for whatever service you're using. Walk through the steps it provides and get that two-factor piece set up. It's a little extra inconvenience, an extra 5 seconds of time for you, 10 seconds of time for you to sign in, of inconvenience every time you want to sign in. But the outcome is it saves you from possible loss of revenue, loss of reputation, embarrassment to your organization, etc. So I think it's well worth what little bit of time it adds to your day. Now, to go back to a lighter note, after you've done those steps, the next thing you want to create is a shared mailbox. Now, the shared mailboxes are really the part that a lot of organizations I've seen, unfortunately, don't get right from the get-go. This is your info @ accounting @ donate @ volunteer @ etc. Email accounts. So these are, if you want to, hey, if you want to learn more about our organization, contact us at info @ and we'll just use the firstchurch.com example. I'm sure there's actually someone out there that has something called First Church, and now if you do actually have that and that's literally the title of it, I would honestly kind of find it fun to hear about it. But we're just going to call it, let's change it up. So we're going to call it at Awesome Organization. So it'd be, if you want to learn more about us, contact us at info @ awesomeorganization.org. Or, if you're accounting, maybe you're having a client that reaches out and says, hey, I need to adjust my billing. You can tell them, hey, I just need you to contact our accounting team at accounting@awesomeorganization.org. Or someone says, how can I donate? Learn more about how to donate or if you have a question about your donation, maybe this would be more of an option. If you have a question about your donation, you can reach out to us at donate@awesomeorganization.org. Or volunteer. You might have someone that's like, man, I really like what you're doing and I want to partner with you and I want to come help, give some of my time to help. You could tell them, great, reach out to our volunteer coordinator at volunteer@awesomeorganization.org. You see, these are all about collecting contact from multiple places, and the reason you create shared mailboxes, and in G Suite and Google Workplace, I believe they have them under Google Groups technically. I don't think Google at the time of this recording, to my knowledge, has not set up shared mailboxes per se, but what you'll do is you set these up because you don't want them tied to a single person, because you're going to have people come and go over time. Like the person that looks at your info at now may not be the same person 5 or 10 years from now, or even a year from now. So these are about functions. These email addresses are about a function or a role that they're trying to serve. You want to set them up that way. You don't want them tied to a person. You don't want them to be a standard user inbox. You want this to be where you can get multiple people delegated to this inbox, and then multiple people are looking at. That's the whole point of shared. As your team grows, there's a good chance more than one person might view this account. Now, I've seen where people have set up user accounts and used them for shared mailboxes, but from a management side of things, I'll just tell you now, it's going to make things a lot more of a headache for you, so you want to avoid that. Really try to get this. I'm trying to help you get a good foundation, a good industry-grade foundation set up early on in your ministry or your nonprofit to help you build it correctly moving forward. That's the goal here. And you know what? Things are going to change. These recordings are going to become out of date eventually, things like that. But some of this stuff is just still good practice. This was good practice 20 years ago kind of idea, having as much as you can, the collaborative inbox. Of course, I wasn't doing IT 20 years ago, but I'm just saying, these practices have continued as you want this collaborative. You sometimes want email addresses that are more of a collaborative space than just a user's inbox. So, and just, I looked it up for clarification, it is called a collab. So they actually have, it is Google Groups, but they call it a collaborative inbox is the word they're using now. So if you're on G Suite as your platform or Google Workplace, it is now called collaborative inbox. So just look up how to create and how to set up and then how to add people to a collaborative inbox. After you've done that piece, as I mentioned, you want to delegate members. So this goes back to, and this one we already kind of partly covered anyways, is delegating members. You want to make it where you create these shared mailboxes and then you assign people to it, because then you're not having to pass around a ton of different email addresses. Like, oh, well, hey, I need the email and password for info, or I need the info and password for accounting so I can add it to my client or to log in at it on the web browser if you're in G Suite or Google Workspace. And the thing is that you've got to have, again, smooth operation. If you delegate members, then on the back end, it's automatically putting that into their account. So for example, Office 365 environment, let's say I have my inbox, right? So I have Zach at awesomeorganization.org. And then I get added to as a delegated member of info at awesomeorganization.org. What'll happen is when I sign into my Outlook and it starts setting it up, I'm going to see two inboxes, mine at the top and another completely separate inbox below mine in that left side menu. And in that left side menu, then you're going to see that delegated account with all of its inboxes. And I can manage both email accounts from right there and do whatever I need to do and send as either account, depending on which account I'm in, and be able to completely work at it, and it automatically populates there for me instead of having to go through a bunch of sign-in processes and stuff like that. So that would be my next recommendation, is get that piece set up. The last recommendation I'm going to have in place for you and suggest is set up signatures on your email accounts. A signature is important because it gives a good uniformed expectation to people and make your signatures uniform. So if it's going to be like name, position, job title or position, email address, phone number, or phone number and email address, however you want to do it, maybe company quote underneath, and then links to social media or a logo or something like that. But figure out what you want to be that standard signature, and then actually in both, for example, and I know I use them a lot, but I know they're the two big players, so we're going to cover them a lot. In both Office 365 and in Google Workspace, there are ways to organizationally wide set the signatures, but if you're not quite to that point yet, my recommendation is to go back through and at least tell your team, hey, here's how I want you guys to all format your thing. Again, common thing being something like name, job title, phone and email, again, maybe company quote or logo, something like that, social media links. Just, again, use that signature as kind of a wrap-up. And again, it's sometimes a good way to just put out there like your links and your information. So that's always good. To kind of wrap this episode up again, just in summary, this is really a high-level view at how to set up just the basics to get your email account off the ground. Again, a lot of what we're looking at here, guys, is just good basics, good best practices, getting started. There's a lot more that we can go into with email and all that, and it's kind of just any part of technology is kind of just where you could just keep going forever, kind of a thing, into levels of things you could delve into. But at least for now, this is just kind of high level. This is, I need to get started, I need email, I need to get moving on this because I need to be able to contact my supporters and the people I'm trying to help, and the people that want to partner with us, or the people I want to reach out to help them learn about us, etc. And this is just to get you going. And as you dig more into it, you'll find out there's a lot you can do with it. But these practices will at least get you on a good basic starting point to move forward with your email account in a way that it becomes an asset right out the gate, and using good standard best practices that you can continue and grow on as your ministry grows from small to medium to large to whatever size it grows into. These best practices are going to be important regardless. So again, thanks you guys for joining the podcast today. If you like what you heard, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, follow us on Anchor, follow us on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. There's a lot of them. You can always find out more about us at bitsandbibles.com. That's again, that's bitsandbibles.com. Thank you again for joining, and we'll see you guys next week. Catch you later.